Today on the Rise of the Challenge podcast.
Couple of years almost. I was sick. I was not okay. So with that being said, when you are laying there knowing that you are unwell, feeling unwell, and then the brain goes, when I feel better, I want to do this. When I feel better, I want to do this. And when I'm older, I want to do this. So there were a lot of ideas that had been percolating within me and that I wanted to do when I was old enough to do them. And many of those things I've done.
Welcome to the Rise of the Challenge podcast. Joining today, he's a personal brand coach and motivational speaker. It's David Allen Tracy. How are you doing today, David?
Great. Thanks for having me on, Alex.
We're so excited to have you on the show to talk about your Rise to the Challenge. What we like to do with all our guests is go right to the beginning. Talk about where you're from and what you like doing growing up.
I'm originally was born in Wisconsin, but I was raised in Panama in Central America. And growing up, my brother and I, we would go out and shoot tarantulas with BB guns. No joke. And we would climb trees in the jungle, and we'd slide into the river and swim, and we did all kinds of crazy stuff like that, and build forts, and it was fun. Growing up in Panama was a lot of fun. My parents had a nonprofit there that they did that worked amongst indigenous tribes in Panama, and so we grew up speaking Spanish and in the jungle, and just it was a great childhood in so many ways. So yeah.
I think shooting tarantulas with a BB gun is not a thing a normal kid would say. Taking that situation, and you kind of talked about the different activities, and especially growing up in Panama, being in the outdoors, did it kind of give you that kind of thrill seeker kind of side, or kind of that adventurous kind of mindset with being outside, doing all the things you and your brother did?
Well, it 100% did. I mean, I think from the onset, we traveled a lot as kids. And so by the time I was 5 years old, we moved to Canada, we moved to Texas, we moved to Florida, we moved to Mexico, we moved to Guatemala. So I was in Panama by age 7 and 8. And basically from that point was in Panama and traveled to over 40 countries. By the time I think up till now, I've traveled to over 40 countries, and most of it, though, happened before I was 30. So I traveled to Africa when I was 11. So like, there's been so many experiences with travel and cross-cultural experiences that I've had that have definitely put in me this kind of hunger for like adventure, for new experiences, for kind of pushing the boundaries. What's the last frontier? And yeah, like, it seems weird because the whole shooting tarantulas thing, these are huge. Like tarantulas are the size of your hand, and there's hundreds of them everywhere. And at night, if you go out with a flashlight and you shine in a certain angle, you actually can see their beady eyes, and they're just everywhere. So it's probably, looking to nowadays, I probably wouldn't do it because I actually kind of feel bad. I shouldn't, because tarantulas are gross, but I do feel bad. But they just so it was fun.
With going to all those places, moving around, a kids kind of don't get that opportunity to build bonds and stuff because they're picking up their lives, going to the next place, and you kind of get into that rhythm. Then you're like, okay, I don't want to make friends because I might be moving again. What was that like for you? And especially with the traveling part, was that okay? Moving around all around, or you didn't really have a choice, you kind of had to, so you just dealt with what the cards gave you?
So for me, it was like what I knew. And I think when it's what it's kind of what you embrace. It's what you understand to be normal. And so in many respects, that was normal for us. And even in my adult life, I find myself moving a lot. And it's not this gypsy thing. It's just understanding that sometimes there's opportunities or situations in which a move is required. I recently just moved from Iowa to Florida to do business, and before Iowa we were living in Panama, and before Panama we were in Hawaii, and and this is over the course of moving is a kind of a normal thing for us. But at the same time, in terms of the relationships, it does forge a deeper bond with siblings, for one. And secondly, the nonprofit that my parents were running had a ton of people in it, volunteers from all around the world who would come in. Many of them were long-term staff. So we had a whole community around us all the time that we were with. And uh, I was homeschooled up until fifth grade. Then I went to a not a boarding school. We almost went to a boarding school. I went to a American school that was mainly for missionary kids, military kids, uh, expat business kids. A lot of different types of foreign students were there, and basically, I've definitely made some friendships there as well until I was 14 and got diagnosed with cancer and had to go through chemo, and that kind of put a little halt on that, and I was back home again. But yeah, I never felt I lacked friends growing up, for sure.
Going into age 14, getting diagnosed with cancer, talk about leading up to it. Was there any symptoms? Were you noticing any changes? Were people noticing anything going on until you got the news?
Well, full transparency, it was testicular cancer. So it's very common for young men and young boys, ages like 13 to 21, if that can be a very common thing with the type of cancer, except that mine was a very aggressive form. It grew very quickly. And of course, when you're 14, you're not telling anybody about what's going on, you know? So I kept it to myself, but I knew something was off and wrong, and eventually it just got to the point where it had to be expressed. So we went to doctors, and yeah, sure enough, the cancer was malignant, and it was very aggressive, and it had to be aggressively treated. And it was a hard 2 years at least, if not 4 or 5 years of recovery from that chemo. So very, very, very difficult season, but one in which I grew a lot and matured a lot, and learned a lot of valuable life lessons, you know.
You talked about the learning aspect of it, kind of that growing because you're having to deal with something that's very traumatic. What was the biggest thing it taught you about yourself going through those 2 years?
That we are not guaranteed anything in life. We're not guaranteed anything. We live a short life. We don't know how long we're going to live. Even if we live to be 95, that's only like 34,675 days. It's really not that many days. I've lived about 13,500 days so far. I've learned that to make each day count, each day to be valuable. And that means that I want to tap into what my mission is, what my vision is, what my purpose is, and to execute that vision and purpose. And not only be mission driven, but be people driven, to be invested in my children and to relationships around me and to leave a legacy. It was a strange thing as a 14-year-old, 15-year-old as well, to really be going through treatment like that and to have young kids in the cancer ward who were dying. And in fact, I had a young boy named Oliver who was 5 years old, who had a brain tumor, and he was blind, and he would receive treatment. He'd sit in my lap, and he's the sweetest kid. And one day he wasn't there anymore, and he had passed away, and you just never know. And I think as a teenager, so many teenagers, and rightfully so, kids, we want to protect them from pain. We want to protect them from suffering. We don't want anyone to be harmed, even if you're not a kid, but kids tend to be focused on the present. That's kind of where I want my kids to be, is thinking a lot about enjoying their day. And I have four daughters, ages 7 to 14, and I want them to enjoy each other and to enjoy each day. And as they get older and they mature, of course, we bring up elements of like the future, right?
Mhm.
And are you going to get an education, and being a mom, and marriage, and all those kind of things? But there is this kind of innocence, this bliss that happens in childhood where you just kind of get to live and have fun, and go to school and then play, basically. And uh, for me, it was a very sobering reality at a very young age to realize, like, okay, like, what really matters in life? And I had a lot of time to think. I had a lot of time to process. I mean, I was in bed for a couple of years almost. I was sick. I was not okay. So with that being said, when you are laying there knowing that you are unwell, feeling unwell, and then the brain goes, when I feel better, I want to do this. When I feel better, I want to do this. And when I'm older, I want to do this. So there were a lot of ideas that had been percolating within me, and that I wanted to do when I was old enough to do them. And many of those things I've done. Many of the things that I wanted to do, I've done. And so I think so often society or the system, whatever you want to call it, causes us to be passive and not pursue our dreams because we get distracted really easily from our devices to media to social media to, the buffet society we live in gives us everything within our grasp now. So I get immediate satisfaction now, but it oftentimes causes us to be numb to making plans for our future. And so we work a job we don't love, we do things we don't like, and we kind of are okay with it. And then we kind of live to live, but there's no thought of what we're living for and what we're leaving behind. So that's really one of the things that it did for me, for sure.
You talked about during those times you had the opportunity to kind of think about what is valuable to you, what you wanted to do as you gotten older. And you said you mentioned you were able to accomplish those during that 14 to 15 year time. That's usually a time where someone's really trying to figure out what do they want to do as a career, because the next stage after high school is college, and college is okay, you got to figure out what you're wanting to do now. What was that dream job growing up that you always wanted to do?
For me, it wasn't so much a title or a job description of what I wanted to do. It was more about the type of lifestyle I wanted to have and the type of the difference I wanted to be able to make. And my personality type, I don't know if anyone listening or watching knows of the Enneagram, but I'm an Enneagram 7, and that's a personality type. And in the disc, I'm an I. And so I'm very much a persuader. I'm very much a visionary. I'm very much a futurist. And so I'm always thinking about what can I do next. And so I want to try different things. So I knew that I wanted to become a chef at one point and become a certified chef. So I went to culinary school. I love cooking. I've always loved cooking. And so I became a certified chef and did a lot of the food industry and banqueting and different things like that. It was really fun. And I also knew that at one point I always had this eye for design and aesthetics and the way things look. And I would walk into a space and be like, this is off, the colors are off, or I'd see a logo or a branding and I thought that was off. And so eventually I ended up in marketing. I owned an international marketing agency. I still do actually. I own an interior design company called Eastbridge, and my marketing agency is called Northgate. I knew that I wanted to travel the world and do nonprofit work and philanthropic work, and I did that. I directed a nonprofit for 5 years in Panama City. I did earthquake relief, flood relief in Haiti. After the 2010 earthquake, I wanted to spend some time living in the desert of Egypt and experience what that would be like, and I did that. And there's so many things. There's a list of hundreds of things. I wanted to write a book, and I'm writing a book now, actually. And there so many ideas and things. And I think that for me now today in my career, after summing up my experiences in the whole world of nonprofit work and then a marketing agency and being a serial entrepreneur and owning different businesses, I'm now a personal brand coach. And as a personal brand coach, one of the things I love about it is it allows me to meet individuals who are in so many different walks of life and different careers to really understand and know their world, and allows me to live vicariously through them, and also exposes me to opportunities to experience their facet of the world. And so that's been amazing. Well, then when you start garnering and gleaning from all these experiences from travel and meeting people and working with them, it gives you this story to tell. And of course, I had a story from my childhood. So of course, writing a book makes sense. Being on stage and speaking and motivating people made sense for me. And so I think that that's really, it's hard to say. I've done so many things that were on that list to do that I've done. And I have so many more I want to do. I want to someday own a self-sustainable farm that has a retreat center in it for wellness, and that has farm to table components to it, and that kind of bridges a little bit of that food dynamic of my background, but also a little bit of my personal brand coaching and consulting, and a little bit of that motivation and inner healing work that I do, and all combines. So there's a lot of things that I want to do and a lot of things I've done, and yet I don't think I'm ever going to be content.
You just mentioned the future item was really taking different aspects of what you've already done and kind of forming them together. With each of the jobs or the paths that you've been on, do you feel that it was a stepping stone in a way where you learned something from that one position and it carried over to the next one, and it's still like a building block each time because you're still bringing those skill sets to each one, even though they're maybe in completely different fields? Because a chef to a nonprofit, you might not think on the outside that, oh, it's there's some skills that are working in both, but when you dive down deep, there are something that you might see. But were you figuring that out or noticing that different areas you were in, skill sets were coming and working in all?
100%. Every experience we have in this world, even the negative ones, serve a purpose, or they can serve a purpose if we use them. They become assets for us that we can build this symbiotic ecosystem where everything is interconnected and everything feeds into the next. And so there's nothing that you've been through, that I've been through, that anyone listening here has been through that needs to be wasted. Everything can serve a purpose. It's just a matter of how we look at it. And so for me, it's always been, you know, it, there's always been a common thread. That's what I should say.
Yeah.
If I were to sum it up today, I see it from a different lens because hindsight is 2020, where everything I've done has been about identity. Everything I've done in my life has been about identity. So whether that was the identity of helping an individual overcome trauma and being able to discover their authentic self and operate an identity, their true identity, that's what it is. If it's the identity of a business that is struggling with their branding and they need to be rebranded, and we figure out their story and their narrative and who their target market is and the story of the owners, and we create this iconic brand for them that has this amazing consumer psychology component to it, that's identity. The identity of even food and the story that can be told through food and high quality fine dining and the identity of creating a space, an interior design space where someone walks in and there's this feeling and this nostalgia or this evokes some emotion. It's all about creating branding, identity, and revealing beauty and the inner. That's kind of like always there for me in some shape or form. And so I've seen that in me, and I think all of us at different points when we are transplanted from one thing to the next, there's a career change, maybe even for some people who are listening. And yet you yourself tend to bring the same things to the table, even though you're in a different career. Your personality will still shine through. Your gift sets will still come through. Who you are doesn't necessarily change. We do mature, we do evolve, but who we are in our essence doesn't really. So it doesn't matter if I was in the culinary realm or the nonprofit realm or the marketing realm or the personal branding realm. David Allen Tracy is the same person, just expressing it in a different way or a different format. It's almost like you can plant a seed in the soil in Africa or India or you know wherever it is, that tree is going to grow, and it might grow a little differently because due to the climate and the environment, but it's still going to be a mango tree, you know. And so same for you, Alex. Like you are always going to be Alex no matter what you're doing, and you always bring the same things to the table no matter what role you're in.
I even noticed that with any of the positions I have, like my personality traits continue to be the same throughout each one. And I've always been told, well, you should change that. But then I always think that's not me. Like I don't like being the fake version of me. Like I'm gonna be that person that has that outgoing personality that speaks up, that is kind of the gonna say how it is in a way. And I think that really showcases my strengths in a way. And sometimes people use it as weaknesses, but you talked about identity. My challenge is my identity, but I don't want people to, if you meet me, you're not only thinking of that, you're thinking about all the other things I'm able to accomplish. And like you mentioned, all those things that you've been able to do. Like you don't want people to only know you as one thing, but all the great things you have done.
We all want to be known and seen in the right facet. And the thing is, we're all multi-dimensional. We're all like diamonds with different facets, and depending on where the light angles, it's going to show a different facet. And so, in personal branding, when it comes to that, is yes, there are components to myself that all people see no matter what, even things that I'm not aware of that are unspoken truths that people think about who I am or who they think you are. But then there are things that I'm intentionally hiding or revealing for a purpose. So we all do it. And a prime example of this is we all know, like, we've probably all been to a funeral of a distant relative that we didn't really know at some point in our life, where we knew it was appropriate to wear black and to be solemn and to be there, but we're not actually feeling so much sadness. I mean, maybe we feel a little sad for some of our relatives, but we're not feeling it. But we show respect in that moment by being, contrite and, solemn. So we know how to behave in different situations according to the occasion. And the same thing could be, when you're at a wedding that you don't really know the person. So there's this societal respect in what we do, but then there's this component to where we don't want to live our entire life completely blinding people to the real us. So there's an appropriate occasion in which, especially for business or just influencing strategy, that we do need to be very intentional in how we project ourselves and what we're presenting to the general public, because it's going to produce different outcomes accordingly, especially if we have things that, we all have a perceived self, we all have a true self, and we all have a self that no one can see, whether it's only we can see, and we keep it to ourselves. So we need, so many people struggle with what to reveal about themselves, especially like in this world and age in which everything is so public on social media. Everything is exposed. Well, what's real, what's not? Well, so many influencers are fake. So much of what they present is just not real. It's phony. It's completely staged. It's not real. So we have this hard time sometimes discerning what is real and what's not real. And so authenticity is such a component of identity. And being able to operate in your true identity means you need to be authentic. Well, to be authentic means that you need to know the author yourself really, really well and be comfortable with that so you can write your story. And the more authentic you are, the more you know yourself, the author, then the more authority you can have in the room. I'm not talking authority from a top-down standpoint. I'm talking about it from the standpoint that you know who you are and you're confident, and it exudes confidence in others where they feel safe around you and they're drawn to you. So anytime that there's a strong identity or a strong branding in something, it makes everybody feel pretty like, oh, I get it. This is good. I'm at ease. Or it causes them to spark interest. So depending on what you're wanting to have happen, you can kind of shift the facet accordingly, strategically. So that's kind of a lot of what I try to help people do as a personal brand coach.
Something that you talked about was your four daughters. What has fatherhood for you had played a big impact?
So fatherhood for me it is still incredible. And I remember when I had testicular cancer of all things, I was wondering, can I even have kids? And I can, and I did. But there was this thing, like, I really wanted to have kids, and I specifically wanted to have four girls. And I had watched the movie Little Women, the one with Winona Ryder. And I thought to myself, it would be really cool someday. And I was like a teenager when I watched it or something, but like to have four girls. When I met my wife in 2009 and we talked and we realized we wanted to get married, we talked about having children, and she's like, "Do you want kids or not?" And I said, "Honestly, I would love to have kids. I've always pictured myself having at least four girls." And she goes, "Oh my gosh, I've always wanted four girls too." And lo and behold, we had four girls. It's not like we planned that. It's just how it happened. And my daughters, really, in some respects, I have been able to relive my childhood through them, through the lens of their eyes, and almost vicariously through them. I get to re-experience what it was like to be at the beach. I get to re-experience what it's like to see nature and to snuggle with a cat, or to get in an airplane for the first time, or to whatever it is, to experience life through the lens of the childhood. And so I absolutely love spending there. Probably I love spending time with my girls more than pretty much anyone. Like, I love spending time with my kids. And so they do. I'm a very much a go-getter kind of guy. I'm doing a lot of things all the time. I'm constantly thinking and moving and things, as you can probably tell. And so my kids help me slow down. My kids help me to prioritize relationships and to enjoy small moments and to appreciate the fruit of my work, and they are the best thing that my wife and I could have ever done together is bring these little girls to this world. And so it allows me to really enjoy my life in a different way.
When your daughters grow up and they would listen to a speech that you gave or an interview that you've done, or even read your book when it comes out, what are you hoping that they learn about their father? What do you want them to remember through the times that when they were younger and you were in their lives, but something that is important to you that you want them to always remember about you?
Well, for me, on a very personal level, I would want them to know and see that their dad loved God and loved people, point blank, like outright. That's the for me the most foundational component of who I am and always will be. And and if that could if I can do that, if I can love God and love people really, really well, then man, I must have done something pretty well. I think that all problems in this world can be solved through love. It sounds so like hippie-ish to say that and very like whatever, but it is true. I will every child, grandchild, great grandchild, the thing that they're going to remember about their great grandpa or their grandfather or their dad is not everything that I did or what I said or all my accomplishments. What they're going to remember is how I made them feel each day. Did I make them feel loved? Did they see that I loved them? Did they feel that love for me? And all the different ways that that can manifest. And so it is love. I would want to be remembered for my love. And I'm still learning. I have a lot of growing to do still and learning to love well. You know, we all do. But that is the number one thing. It is not my accomplishments.
When you're not working, our listeners like to learn even more about our guests. What do you like to do for fun that maybe people don't know you like to enjoy?
So a couple of things. I love going for walks in nature a lot, especially out. I grew up in the jungle, so I mean, I love being outdoors. We live in Florida right now in Lakeland, and it's so beautiful here. There are lakes and beautiful trees and gardens and lots of wildlife. It's really beautiful. I love gardening and doing, especially like vegetable gardening and herb gardening, cooking and from those ingredients and then on a very non like super exciting standpoint, I love playing video games. Love playing video games with my daughters. We have a Switch, and you know we've spent many a day, especially when we lived in Iowa and we were wintered out and snowed in, that we got a lot of game time in that way.
I think a lot of listeners are going to want to know, what is that go-to dish for you that you like to cook?
I love making anything. Well, it's always different for me, I think, but probably Korean food. I love making
Okay.
Korean food a lot. And so kimchi, I have a certification in fermentation from Harvard University. So I love fermenting foods and creating kimchis and sauerkrauts and all those kind of things. But Korean food specifically is a excuse me, a cuisine that I really love. They have all these side dishes that you'll have when you eat a meal, and those take time to make. And so we'll make some of those up in bulk, and then we have them. And I love Korean food a lot. So
When you said you got a Harvard certification, and it's just fascinating that you think Harvard, it's that does not even come into people's minds that you can get something like that, which is, I think a lot of people are learning something new listening to this.
Harvard actually provides a lot of certifications. You can get our certificates depending on what you do, but it is they had this course on fermentation, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do it. I already had my culinary certificate. I already had my. I'm a certified chef, and I had that already. And I love fermenting foods and learning about the science behind it and experimenting with sourdough breads and kombuchas and things like that. But I wanted to learn more about the science behind it, and Harvard was offering this certificate in it, and I was like, I'm doing it. So I signed up, did the class, took about 3 months, and I got all these things shipped to me, and we did it. And now I have this Harvard certification in fermentation.
Very cool. The final question I'll ask you, for someone that's listened to this interview based on your journey and experience, what tips or advice would you give them to overcome obstacles, accomplish their goals, and rise to the challenge?
The first thing I would say is to evaluate the cost, to evaluate uh, essentially where you're going. So make a plan. And I think anytime that there's a successful venture, doesn't matter what type of venture that is, whether it's a business venture or an adventure or any type of trip or travel, the most effective type of anything you're going to do is going to require some planning and understanding where you're going. And so we can make that roadmap in advance. And it's not only just like a plan, like 1, 2, 3, this is what we're doing, but it's also to envision what that could be like. So if you're a business owner or you want to become a business owner, we oftentimes think about things from the standpoint, I want to have this job or this company, but we don't think about what that daily could look like. So a lot of the people that come to me realize that, oh, I didn't really count the cost that this was going to cost me a lot of time or a lot more money, or my lifestyle would have to change a lot. And there are a lot of components to this type of business I didn't think about, the career component. So I help people really evaluate what will it look like for you to live in that space. A lot of musicians and bands, for example, or singers, they love the idea of being on stage and singing, but have they thought about the idea that if they do that as a career, that they will literally be traveling year round all over the country and singing the same songs every night or every weekend, and that can get quite boring after a while, but they have to keep doing it. And so it sounds all like amazing, but then there's this reality that has to hit. So it's really evaluating where you're going, why you're going there, and what will it be like if you do get success, because success is something that so many people want, but then they're afraid of it once they get it, because there's this huge amount of responsibility that they never thought they'd have. So knowing yourself, knowing your weaknesses, knowing your personality, all of that comes into play with being able to map out an effective roadmap for you in making decisions, and then not being so shocked or surprised when stuff does hit the fan.
David, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about your rise to the challenge. You're inspiring so many people, and we are excited to see what the future looks like for you.
Thank you, Alex. I really appreciate being on too.
Tune in next time to hear my next guest talk about their rise to the challenge. Remember to follow and subscribe on all major audio platforms, and make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to get a full-length episode in video format. What path do you take to accomplish your goals? You decide.